Okay. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Very good. Welcome to you all. Welcome back. And of course, welcome to the students attending these satsangs online. By the way, thank you for get many emailed questions from students all over the world. That's wonderful. I have to apologize in advance because we're getting many more questions than we can handle in one of these sessions. So if I don't get to your question, I apologize in advance. And as we've done before, we'll take questions both from our local ashram students and then also take questions from online students. We'll start online. This is a question from Anonymous, and you'll see why in a moment. You often mention that emotions are normal, and emotions are what makes us human. Vedanta teaches that every person is in essence divine. We are divine beings with very human emotions. Now the question comes, but how can we then manage strong emotions like anger and hatred towards people that perform adharmic actions, especially if the adharmic person lives in your same household? Okay, you get it. I mean, this is one of the most common problems. And that, people are people, even if you're related. I mean, what can we do? People are people. Anyway, so to have these conflicts in a home, let's see. It's difficult to see divinity when their adharmic actions are what you see. How to manage these strong emotions. The questioner gets it in one level, and that is, the goal is not to how can we manage strong emotions? That's a good word to use, to manage those emotions, because to imagine that you should somehow be free from these emotions is an unrealistic expectation. You've known people who say, I'm a spiritual person, I shouldn't get angry. What is that? You're a spiritual person, good. Are you still a human being? And if you're still a human being, then you are subject to anger and hurt and other emotions. So, to manage these strong emotions, several strategies. The ultimate solution is found in the teachings of Vedanta, but that's a long-term solution. Shorter-term solutions would include meditation. You'd be surprised. If you are a regular meditator, you will be surprised how it transforms previously challenging situations into situations that you can easily manage. Okay? So, meditation is one good short-term solution. Also, if there are problems in the family, those problems need to be addressed. Allow me to be very pragmatic here. If you have problems with your body, do you ignore them? If they're serious problems, you go to a doctor. If there are problems, if you as an individual find yourself incapable of dealing with your own emotions, should you ignore that? we have therapists, psychologists, skillful professionals who can help you with that. If you go to treat physical problems, why should you not go for treatment of psychological problems? And one more step. Psychologists themselves often say it's the family that's sick. If there's a lot of stress and conflict in a family, many therapists will say the problem is not the individuals, the problem is the family, in which case the family needs treatment, and there are family therapists. So here, let's be pragmatic. So the ultimate solution through Advaita Vedanta is whatever is happening right now doesn't affect me. But that's the long-term solution. Shorter-term solution, meditation, will make these problems more manageable, but the pragmatic, immediate solution is just be pragmatic. Where there's a problem, deal with it. There are so many resources we have access to today, and not to use those resources just plunges us into further and further struggles. Okay, next. This is from Stavros, who lives in Sydney, Australia. And fairly elaborate question. Just at the end, we say that a Jivan Mukta, an enlightened person, after dropping the physical and physical and subtle bodies. Physical body, we know very well. The so-called subtle body is the sum total of all the non-physical components of who you are. Includes your mind, senses, memories, powers of walking and talking, life force, prana, all of that collectively is referred to as sukshma sharira, subtle body. So the question here is, what happens when that enlightened person at death becomes or resumes consciously the one which is all, which includes Ishvara? So allow me to paraphrase. What happens to an enlightened person at death? What is the experience of an enlightened person at death? And we can contrast that with what happens to one who is not enlightened. We've discussed this before. With regard to to answer these questions, we have to call upon the doctrine of karma, because according to the doctrine of karma, if you're not enlightened, your subtle body will be driven to take another physical body for the sake of experiencing those unfructified karmas that remain. Every single person has so much karma remaining to be fructified. The laws of karma demand that those karmas eventually get fructified. In order for them to get fructified, you have to be around to experience them. Therefore, at death, we can say that the laws of karma together maintain the integrity of the subtle body. Hold that subtle body together. I've referred to it as karmic glue. So that karmic glue holds the elements of the subtle body together and drives it then to take another physical body for the sake of fructifying those karmas. Now, for the enlightened person has already broken free from that connection to past karmas. A little technical, we don't need to get into the details here, but the enlightened person is free from karmas. because the enlightened person is free from karmas, the subtle body is not affected by the laws of karma. There's no karmas remaining to affect the subtle body of the enlightened person. So at death, for the enlightened person, just as the physical body, stula sharira, returns to stula bhutas, physical elements, in the same way the sukshma sharira, the subtle body, returns to subtle elements and is not then reborn. Now, there is, and I think what his question is, there is a way of looking at this, which is discussed not commonly, but in some commentaries, which says that this is an alternate interpretation, your subtle body, your physical body becomes non-separate from the universe. The physical universe can be metaphorically understood as Ishvara's body. Your physical body becomes non-separate from Ishvara's so-called physical body. Your subtle body merges, as it were, with Ishvara's subtle body. So, figuratively speaking, we can say that the subtle, that at both the physical and subtle levels, you merge with Ishvara. Ishvara is the whole, saguna Brahman. And that's a very beautiful perspective. It's not the only perspective, but a very beautiful perspective. The enlightened person merges with Ishvara. What happens to Atma? Well, nothing. Nothing at all. And that's true whether you're enlightened or not. All of this refers to the individual, that which creates that individual person. None of this applies to pure consciousness, which is your essential nature. So what happens to consciousness at the time of death, whether you're enlightened or not, consciousness remains boundaryless, limitless, full, complete, vast, and utterly unaffected by anything and everything, so therefore utterly free from suffering. Nothing happens to Atma. Okay, let's take one more question here, and then we'll take some local questions. This is a question from Robert, who lives in Denver, Robert. And context, universe is governed by Ishvara's intelligent order. Very good. The veil of ignorance, or just ignorance, is part of the universe. Ignorance is a natural feature of the universe. Therefore, it is part of the intelligent order. No problem. Now, question, given the above context, what is the purpose of the veil of ignorance and the subsequent suffering? What purpose do these serve in the intelligent order? The word purpose is kind of problematic here. I don't know if this is Robert's problem, but for many, people have this kind of a new age thought. Everything has a purpose. Everything has a meaning. Sounds good, but that's not exactly what's taught through the doctrine of karma. Now, I'm just trying to think of where that idea comes from. Everything has a purpose, everything has a meaning. Some people believe that there is a flow, life after life after life, which leads us to a higher and higher and higher, and sometimes they use terms, higher plane of existence. They like to use terminology like that. And none of that is supported by Hinduism in general and the doctrine of karma in particular. This is philosophers like the fancy terminology. It is a teleological process, which is a process of evolution. So many people ascribe to this process of evolution. By the way, evolution, as understood by Darwin, is from simple to complex, right? Not in a reverse direction. So evolution has an arrow. Evolution applies to physical things. Who says evolution applies to spiritual things? Some people say that, but it is not taught by the doctrine of karma. There is no purpose, there is no deliberate evolution to a higher state. After all, if you commit enough bad karmas in this life, you can presumably get reborn as a cockroach in your next life. That's devolution, which is possible, which is supported by the doctrine of karma. So the doctrine of karma doesn't have a purpose in mind, except if the doctrine of karma has a purpose, its purpose is you should receive the results of any action you commit. That's it. There's no sense of going higher and higher and higher. So this is an idea which is actually foreign to the doctrine of karma. Evolution indeed applies to physical things. Evolution is not necessarily applicable at a spiritual level. And what purpose does veil of ignorance and suffering serve? So that's the problem with this purpose. It's not Ishvara. Purpose suggests intention, right? Ishvara has an intention. He has a plan. He has an agenda. So you can see where this goes. So this idea, purpose and intention, these are very human qualities. And to take these human qualities of purpose and intention and superimpose them on Ishvara is a problem. What happens is natural. That doesn't, by the way, when we say what happens according to the doctrine of karma, don't think that kicks Ishvara out of the equation, as it were, because it's Ishvara's intelligence who makes the doctrine of karma work. Ishvara's intelligence is present in the workings of the laws of karma. Okay, that's Robert's question. Why don't we take some local questions here? Microphone is here. Raise your hand and we'll take your question. Any? No? Come back here.
I have several questions, but we'll try to filter them. So one little comment from the previous satsang is that you said that Brahman actually does nothing, right? And everything is done by saguna Brahman.
Yes.
But saguna Brahman kind of utilizes the power of Maya, and that's how he is doing everything, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it doesn't completely eliminate dissolve the question, where does this Maya come from, mm-hmm. Right? It seems to me logical to assume that it's kind of exists in latent form in Brahman itself, or is it magically appearing from?
It's a very good question. Where does Maya come from? To ask where it comes from suggests that it has a source, and there's a point of time where it comes into existence. Suppose Maya doesn't have a point of time when it comes into existence, like saguna Brahman, like Ishvara. Ishvara has no beginning. The God of the cosmos, creator, sustainer, destroyer, has no beginning. Why should Maya have a beginning? So, just as Ishvara is beginningless, Maya is beginningless. So we can't ask, how did it come into existence? Go ahead and follow
Yes,
on.
I definitely understand what you're saying, but it's not about the time. It's more about, it means that in the, then there is no actually Advaita, right? Then there is not only one being, but Maya
At the
is
level of saguna Brahman, we're not talking about non-dualism. We're now talking about the realm of the world. If you want to talk about non-dualism, then we have to talk about non-dual Brahman, Nirguna Brahman. And from the standpoint of Nirguna Brahman, Saguna Brahman doesn't exist, Maya doesn't exist, you and me doesn't exist, these questions don't exist. So it's not meaningful to talk about Advaita, non-duality, if we're talking about creation, creator, the creative capacity of Maya. We cannot talk about that in the same breath as talking about Advaita. Any follow-up?
Yes, so can I ask one more question?
Yes.
The example you gave in the class today about the Shankaracharya's didn't have full knowledge about some scientific facts like that where our body is composed with cells and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of, for example, Lord Krishna, who is embodiment of Ishvara on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, right? So he's kind of omniscient, right? So there is no scope of him doesn't knowing something. But he in his speech, sometimes the metaphor he gives, for example, among the nakshatras, I'm like moon or some. It seems to me that it's a little simplistic and does not convey the knowledge of for example, cells or cosmology and everything. How does this?
Allow me to paraphrase your question. So we, in many classes, we talk about a pre-scientific worldview. And that worldview is, knowledge that the body is made of cells and how the power of eyesight works and, photons and electromagnetic radiation. All of this was completely unknown in ancient times. So great teachers like Shankara obviously had no access to this scientific wisdom. Your question is interesting. I've never thought about it before. And the question is, what about Sri Krishna? As an avatara, as an incarnation of Ishvara, theoretically, Sri Krishna should have access to this future scientific knowledge. It's an interesting argument. I've never thought about it before. So why does Sri Krishna not? There's no evidence in wherever you find Sri Krishna teaching, in the Mahabharata, in the Bhagavata Purana, and other scriptures, wherever you hear him teaching, he never makes reference to future scientific discoveries. Why? A philosopher would give a very simple answer. The future doesn't exist yet. That's simply. So the future, you can talk about what exists. To talk about that which doesn't exist is to talk about a non-existence. So Sri Krishna, the future does not yet exist. So therefore, Sri Krishna didn't have access to it, being non-existent. Now, I just lost the train of thought there.
But he's Trikaladarshi, right? I mean, he sees future, past,
Okay,
everything.
yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So in fact, this term, and you used the correct term, Trikala Darshana, or Trikala Gnya, the one who knows the three periods of time. Little tricky. If Ishvara knows what will happen tomorrow, that denies free will, right? The future is already determined. So, according to the doctrine of karma, which depends on free will, the future is not predetermined, and therefore Ishvara doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Then we have to understand this expression, Trikalagnya, the one who knows the three periods of time. In many commentaries, you find it explained as the unchanging consciousness which exists in the past, present, and future. So, now more specifically, in the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, you will never see Ishvara portrayed as one who has specific knowledge of the future. And that's for the reasons I just said. He has knowledge of the future in the sense that the consciousness which Ishvara is present in the future. But Ishvara has no specific knowledge of what will happen in the future because that would refute the doctrine of karma, that would refute the existence of free will. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, it can be further inquired, but...
no, where is the problem?
Okay, so... okay. Then a little problem is that it's not about... I don't think it's about free will, because the body, like 5,000 years ago, had the same constitution as it has now, right? So it's not something connected to free will. It's just how the body functions. So if he just reveals this knowledge, I mean, I don't think that it would violate somehow the free will in any way. It's like more how the universe works or how the body works. It's hard for me to connect to the concept
I'm not
of free will.
getting the connection to free will. So what I said was, if Ishvara knows what will happen tomorrow, it dismisses the existence of free will.
I understand.
Can you respond to that very specifically?
Yes, but he should be knowledgeable about how his creation works, right? It's not about the future or past. It's not the body functions, and some intelligence created it. Right?
Okay, I think I get you. Free will is part of creation. What to do? And if you say, we've had this discussion, does free will really, really exist? This is something that philosophers are going to be arguing, I think, 100 years from now. So, but what we can say two things. One is, from our standpoint of doctrine of karma, the whole thing depends on the existence of free will. And if we look at it through the lens of science, back in, you know that Newtonian science said that the world was perfectly predictable. If you measure the state of the world today, you can calculate where the world will be 100 years from now. You can calculate the location of every particle in the universe. So this is what was the doctrine that was accepted in Newton's time. And I think you know that that's been refuted long ago. So we now know that certain aspects of the world are deterministic, certain aspects are not deterministic. There is, scientifically speaking, such a thing as true randomness. And if we look at it through that scientific lens, if it's really random, then if Ishvara knows what's going to happen, then there's no such thing as random. So now we've got a problem not only with the doctrine of karma, we also have a problem with science, which talks about the non-deterministic nature of certain aspects of the universe. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad you pursued it. Okay, other question here in our class. Over here, please.
I think it's a little problem in the sense that Lord Krishna, when he's addressing Uddhava in the beginning of Uddhava Gita, predicts what is going to happen in coming days. So that's the future. And also, if we combine with the Bhagavatam, there's a description of Kali Yuga, which is coming at the end of that era. So there is indication of some future.
Okay, let's talk about
And
that.
also in
there
the
are,
past.
There are many, many scriptural references to what will happen in the future. Absolutely correct. Are they all correct? So look at this. Krishna, we were studying Uddhava Gita in our Saturday classes, and Krishna said that this Vrishni clan is going to self-destruct very shortly. I guess I didn't completely fix that problem. So is that really a prediction? How about, I predict that this class will end in about a half an hour. I predict that the sun will go down tonight around 6 p.m. When Krishna was predicting the self-destruction of the Vrishni clan, could have been like that. It was so obvious from existing conditions that he's just saying this is what's going to happen. So, on the other hand, there are many descriptions in the scriptures about what will happen in the future. The whole concept of yugas, concept of cyclic universes, all of this was somehow intuited by the ancient rishis. Which is correct, but I don't think it's correct to say it was knowledge of the future. Knowledge of the universe and how the universe works. So if we know how the universe works, we know the orbit of planets. This is back to our determinism of Newton, etc. But if we know how the universe works, based on the current state, we can predict the future. So I think that's a more accurate way of understanding the scriptural references to like the yugas and all of this stuff. By the way, none of that also has any scientific validity. So it was their intuitions. Of course, their intuitions were remarkably accurate, but they were not scientific as we understand it today. But I think we can easily reconcile all of that and say that no rishi, no aspect of Ishvara has knowledge of specific things in the future. And I said, for the two reasons we just discussed, is it denies free will, and it also denies modern scientific concept of non-determinate aspects of the world. Does that work for you? Okay. Take one more question here, and then we'll go back online. Where? I don't know.
One comment and a question about one of the online questions you had. It seemed to me that looking at how Krishna might have spoken when he was speaking and now, would it have been appropriate for him to talk about things we do now? 200 years ago, would you have talked to a common person and told them about quantum mechanics and non-deterministic? You know, they were all they knew was not even, Newtonian mechanics. So and do we really understand how all this stuff works now? I think science is continually trying to learn that stuff. So that's just a sort of comment on that. Going back to one of the online questions about the enlightened and unenlightened moving through. I always had the thought that it was a compulsion to come back that drove the unenlightened, where if an enlightened person comes back, it's by choice. Is that...
Okay, let's try to address that. Can an enlightened person choose to come back? In the Buddhist tradition, that's accepted. And according to the doctrine of karma, it's not possible. Which is interesting because Buddhism accepts the doctrine of karma, but interprets it differently. And of course, any doctrine is subject to different interpretations. So the bodhisattva is said to be one who is enlightened, but who chooses to come back and get reincarnated after this life is over for the sake of removing suffering from all living beings. So that is held by, I don't know, not all Buddhists, but perhaps many Buddhists would accept that. There's no basis for that, though, in the Hindu interpretation or Advaita Vedanta interpretation of the doctrine of karma. That wouldn't be accepted. Also, it's different than our Avatara Vada, the incarnation of Sri Krishna, Sri Rama. So Sri Krishna is not an enlightened person from a... Sri Krishna, somebody named, somebody named George got enlightened in the last lifetime and then chose to come back as Sri Krishna. And I'm being intentionally silly here. So the doctrine of Avatara Vada, the incarnation of Ishvara, is not based on individual karmas. So George in his prior life was an individual with individual karmas, but who gets reincarnated as Sri Krishna is not an individual like George, but rather Ishvara itself.
Okay. Just to clarify for my mind, then all these teachers that have come, they were, in the last lifetime, they were close to being realized, and they come into their current lifetime and get the last bit of knowledge, to that last spark to be enlightened, and then they pass on that knowledge to us.
Okay.
Like Ramana Maharshi, Puja Swami Dayananda.
Okay. We're is that still coming from that microphone? Okay. It's okay now. So we're back to that evolution idea, I think. And that is somebody who is enlightened in this life, or even so-called spiritually advanced, and I would put that in quotation marks, somebody who is enlightened or spiritually advanced in this lifetime, is it necessarily because of their prior lifetime, immediately preceding lifetime? We don't know. You can't, there's no necessary, it's possible, anything is possible, but there's no necessary connection. What is taught, however, is that anyone who is enlightened in this lifetime or spiritually advanced in this lifetime is such because of good karmas from an infinite number of prior lives. So those good karmas have fructified in such a way as to give that person opportunities for spiritual growth and maybe the absence of obstacles to spiritual growth, because there are so many possible obstacles. If you were born in a slum in Mumbai, that's pretty severe obstacle. Or if you don't get me started, I'll just go off. So there's no shortage of obstacles which can derail a person's spiritual growth. And so what is taught is those who do gain enlightenment or are so-called spiritually advanced in this lifetime, they are benefited. Let me be very careful. I am not saying that they are enlightened or advanced because of their good karmas. They're enlightened or advanced because they had a good teacher. They had access to a proper teacher, they had access to scriptures, etc., etc. But access to a good teacher, access to scriptures means you have to have some good karma to have that access. So in that sense, we would say good karma plays a role, but good karma is not causative of enlightenment. Does that work for you? Okay, let's take some online questions here. This is Uma. Uma lives in Chicago, and she asks, in chapter 16 of the Bhagavad Gita, there's a discussion about the divine and demonic attributes, Daiva and Asura. Anger is seen as an impurity of the mind as part of that Asura Sampat. And her question now is, but doesn't anger have a healthy role to play in abusive situations? Good question. For example, when a wife is suffering verbal or physical abuse, it is anger that lets her take a stand against it. So she's arguing for anger having a positive role in resolving problems in general and in particular the problem of abuse. And I would strongly disagree with that. Because you can handle abuse without getting angry. In fact, if you really get overwhelmed by your anger, your response to abuse is not going to be as skillful as it could be if you weren't overcome by anger. So anger, there's people talk of righteous anger. There's such a thing as righteousness, abiding with laws of dharma. But this idea of righteous anger, to turn anger into a tool of dharma, does that even make sense? Anger is harmful to you, right? When you get angry, who is harmed by that anger? The person you're angry at could care less. If you have anger, that anger hurts you. Both in a physical sense, you can get heartburn and maybe ulcers from chronic anger. And in a psychological sense, it can do a lot of damage. So if we understand dharma to be that which leads to ahimsa, non-injury, and if anger is hurtful to you, then how can anger be dharmic? So from a scriptural standpoint, we would say that anger in any manner or form causes harm, therefore is adharmic. And from a psychological standpoint, it's pretty easy to make the argument that anger clouds your reasoning. And with your reasoning clouded by anger, how you respond to any situation, including an abusive situation, your response will be less skillful if it's under the influence of anger. Now, notice none of what I said justifies the abuse. If the abuse is there, deal with it. But getting angry doesn't make the abuse go away. Do something concrete to specifically deal with the abuse. Anger is not a solution. Okay, another question. This is from Anja, who lives in Germany. And she says, I think it's she, I'm not sure, Anja. The questioner says, what is Advaita Vedanta's position on the statement of non-duality teachers who say that there is only ever now, that we only ever have this single moment, and that we ourselves are this one now. This now is absolutely perfect, complete, and eternal. Past and future are only thoughts that arise in now. Sounds like Anja has listened to Eckhart Tolle, who is not unique in this regard. I would say Eckhart Tolle is part of a group that, she asked what is the Advaita Vedanta position, and I would say that the Advaita Vedanta position is that these teachings, such teachings, fall into a category that we now call neo-Advaita, which means, neo means not just new, but in this case, a new corruption of the teachings, of the traditional teachings of Advaita Vedanta. And the simplest way, we could talk about neo-Advaita for hours. We could talk about how it arose and what it teaches. But in very simple terms, neo-Advaita embraces the truth of Advaita. That is, all that exists is one non-dual Brahman, and that is what exists now. So they got that right. What's missing is a very highly developed methodology that can lead you to discover that truth. So in other words, they give you the ultimate truth, but don't help you understand it. Don't help you get there. So it's massively defective because you've heard me say before, what's unique and powerful in Advaita Vedanta is not what it teaches, but how it teaches. Its methodology is crucial. And neo-Advaita strips Advaita Vedanta of that very methodology. And they actually support it with some very lame logic. And it says, you're already, Satchidananda, they may not use the Sanskrit terminology, you are already liberated. You are already free, which is what Advaita Vedanta would say, which is true. You're already liberated, you're already free. Therefore, watch this, why do you need any spiritual practice? What? Wait a minute. It's spiritual practice that leads you to recognize the truth that you are already liberated or already free. That concept that is held by the neo-Advaitans is merely that. It is a concept that you are already liberated, already free. It is not a personal discovery. See the difference between understanding a concept, you are eternally free, versus a personal discovery that your true nature as pure consciousness is unchanging and therefore eternally free. So this is, it's rather problematic. And Anja writes from Germany, you should know that in Europe and in this country as well, this neo-Advaita has some roots, or some traction, as people like to say. That is, it's kind of popular and people are attracted to it. Of course, a personal comment, people are always attracted to something that sounds like a shortcut. And neo-Advaita definitely falls into that category of shortcut, instant enlightenment. Obviously, it doesn't work like that. Okay, another question online. This is from Kartik. In the prior satsang, I made a rather bold statement when I said that the Kartik lives where? London. So Kartik in London watched the last week's satsang, in which I said very boldly, the doctrine of karma has no spiritual utility. I've never said that before, and it may sound shocking to me, but it's true. It's absolutely true if you understand it properly. And Kartik here has a different understanding. He says that the doctrine of karma is central to karma yoga, and without doctrine of karma, how is karma yoga possible? And without karma yoga, how can one gain spiritual maturity and gain enlightenment? So there is some significant confusion here about what is the doctrine of karma and what is its relationship to karma yoga. So that's actually a good observation. His confusion leads to something important for us to discuss. The doctrine of karma is not a doctrine of cause and effect. It's more complex than that. The doctrine of karma begins, cause and effect is science. If we have science, then what do you need doctrine of karma for? So doctrine of karma begins with the fact that means it is a doctrine that suggests that a action, karma, gives rise to two different kinds of result. Science says that an action gives a result. Doctrine of karma says an action gives rise to two different kinds of result. Drishtapala, a result that takes place immediately due to the action, and that's what science teaches. But doctrine of karma includes a second kind of result called adrishtapala. Adrishtapala means a secondary result which does not occur immediately with the karma, but rather a result held in a state of abeyance, a pending result, which will take place at some point in the future, which is not knowable to us. So the doctrine of karma is a doctrine that says for a result, for any action, there are these two kinds of results, and then it goes on from there. But the basis for the doctrine of karma is the twofold result of any action you commit. Suppose you don't believe in the doctrine of karma. Can you practice karma yoga? And that's Karthik's argument. He says without the doctrine of karma, you can't practice karma yoga. If you don't believe in the doctrine of karma, can you believe in Ishvara? Any problem? No problem, right? Suppose the world just functions according to laws of science. Where did those natural laws come from? Ishvara's intelligence. Where did the world come from? Ishvara. So there's, absence of the doctrine of karma doesn't prevent you from understanding Ishvara. And I think here's the crucial part. We understand Ishvara as karma pala data. That's crucial to karma yoga. Ishvara is the giver of the fruits of action. If you believe in the doctrine of karma, Ishvara is a giver of both adrishtapala and drishtapala. If you don't believe in the doctrine of karma, does Ishvara cease to be karma paladata? Ishvara continues to be karma paladata of the drishtapala. So whatever you do, the results are in Ishvara's hands. You don't need to believe in the doctrine of karma to understand that whatever happens according to the laws of nature, which are manifestation of Ishvara's intelligence. Where does the doctrine of karma become necessary? So, and maybe Karthik misunderstood what is the doctrine of karma. So the doctrine of karma does not say Ishvara's karma paladata. That's not part of the doctrine of karma. The doctrine of karma specifically it's actually interesting. The doctrine of karma could actually be accepted by atheists. Think about it, right? You can understand the doctrine of karma in a completely mechanical way.
They do.
Some do. In fact, Jainas do. Really speaking, the Jain tradition can be considered atheistic in a sense. They don't accept Ishvara in as we would understand, and they accept the doctrine of karma perfectly. So, the point here is that the doctrine of karma is a mechanical way of explaining how unexpected results occur. That's a simple way of putting it. It's all based on the existence of adrishta pala. So the doctrine of karma is specifically focused on this adrishta pala. Doctrine of karma says nothing about Ishvara at all. Doctrine of karma says nothing about Ishvara as karma paladata. Of course, Advaita Vedanta, we have a lot to say about Ishvara's role and relationship to this functioning of the laws of karma. We have a lot to say, but that's coming from Advaita Vedanta. That's not coming from the doctrine of karma. So, doctrine of karma, properly understood, and in this very narrow sense that I've established, the doctrine of karma has no spiritual utility. It has tremendous worldly utility in helping us cope with the problems of daily life. Take one more online question. This is from Ajay, who lives in Melbourne. More Australia. And there's actually a significant expat Indian community in Australia, and maybe Ajay is part of that. Anyway, he writes, what is the role of kundalini shakti in enlightenment? So we have two issues. One is what is Kundalini Yoga, and second is what is enlightenment. What is enlightenment? Just to make sure that we don't have any confusion about it, your true nature is already Satchidananda Atma. Your true nature is already divine. Problem is, you don't get it. Why don't you get it? Because you don't get it. Ignorance. That's simple. What is enlightenment? As the word suggests, the removal of ignorance. Not any kind of ignorance, but specifically ignorance of your true divine nature, just to use some general language. So enlightenment is the removal of ignorance of your true nature as Satchidananda Atma. That is enlightenment. Then, what is the role of Kundalini Shakti? So the very concept of Kundalini Shakti is part of a system of meditation that has some ardent followers. It's a system of meditation based on 6 chakras. The 7th is technically not a chakra. So based on these, and these chakras are energy centers, and they're all part of a very complex pre-scientific vision of the nervous system of the body. They believe that this nervous system has, I forget the number, 74,000, 64,000, I forget the number. So this many nadis, these channels through it, which are like nerves. These are channels through which your life force goes, including a life force called Kundalini Shakti. This is all a very elaborate system of meditation. Now, by the way, I have an entire long video on Kundalini, and to understand more thoroughly, I would highly recommend just watch that video. But the short answer to the question, the long answer would be to explain how Kundalini meditation works, and we'll talk about that for 2 hours. We won't do that, that's why watch the video. But the short answer is this: does any meditation technique, including Kundalini meditation techniques, does any meditation technique directly remove ignorance? And this is how Advaita Vedanta approaches a problem. What removes ignorance? Knowledge. What is the result of meditation? Meditation creates a state of mind. Meditation affects your mind. It can create a silent mind, a focused mind. You can visualize. There's a lot of visualization involved in Kundalini Yoga. But I'll be a little technical here, just for 1 minute. In order to gain knowledge, you require a means of knowledge. This is one of my guru's favorite topics. He says to gain knowledge of objects out in the world, you require a means of knowledge called eyesight. To understand that when you see smoke rising from a mountain, you require a different kind of means of knowledge to know that there's fire present. You only see smoke, but you know there's fire. How do you know? That's another means of knowledge called inference. So one means of knowledge is sense perception. Another means of knowledge is inference, of many kinds of inference. Logic. But notice even that reasoning is based on also perception. You have to see the smoke first, and then you infer the fire. Just a side question, is intuition a valid means of knowledge? And you may say, this person has accurately predicted the results of every presidential election in the US for so many years. Okay. Doesn't mean they'll be right next time. So intuition, we all know what it, there is such a thing as intuition, but intuition is not infallible. That's the only point. There is such a thing as intuition, but it is not an infallible source of knowledge. Now, in Advaita Vedanta, we draw upon another source of knowledge. If you, it is almost too obvious. How did you learn mathematics? How did you learn to read and write? How did you learn so many things? At least early on, you had teachers. So we learn a lot from teachers. In the specific case of Advaita Vedanta, we learn from rishis. The rishis who had discovered these spiritual truths, and drawing upon their wisdom, we gain knowledge. They form, scripture forms an independent means of knowledge. Drawing upon that means of knowledge, we can gain spiritual wisdom. It works for other, you learn mathematics from a book. You can discover your true nature through the teachings of the rishis. They work in very different ways. I don't want to get into the technical details here, but we receive guidance of those who know more than we do. And we can, in a very simplistic way, we can understand those rishis as those who know more than we do. When you meditate, you close your eyes. No book, no one who's wiser than you. When you close your eyes and meditate, you are stuck with your own ignorance. So if you are meditating, and figuratively speaking, you're meditating on your own ignorance. The point I'm making is that meditation in and of itself is not adequate for enlightenment. We need spiritual wisdom. Spiritual wisdom comes from rishis, comes from scriptures, comes from gurus. We need that. Meditation in and of itself does not produce that spiritual wisdom. And any form of meditation, including this kundalini meditation. Okay, another question here. Nirguna Brahman, this is a question from Raja Gopalan, who asks, if Nirguna Brahman is omnipresent, unchanging, and free of gunas, aren't the concepts of saguna Brahman, Maya, etc., merely teaching aids to explain the inexplicable? Tricky. From the standpoint of Nirguna Brahman, there is no such thing as saguna Brahman or Maya or anything. So, but his point then is, are these concepts not teaching devices to help you realize the truth of Nirguna Brahman? There's some truth in that. Nirguna Brahman is not an object you can know. Some of you would say, "Aur ek cheez." It's not one more thing out there in the world that you can know. It's not an object you can know. To know Nirguna Brahman, that kind of Brahma Jnanam, it is unlike any other kind of knowledge. It's not like knowledge of the table or chair. It's not even like knowledge that you are consciousness. Something more, something different. Then to know the nature of consciousness as being nirguna Brahman is a knowledge gained only through scripture. We have no access. We have no personal access to that wisdom. So in a manner of speaking, we could say that the entire body of Vedantic teachings are a device or methodology meant to lead you to understand that which can't be understood in any other way. Absolutely true. Which some people have made this observation, which sounds bad, but it's absolutely true. The teachings of Vedanta are mithya. How's that? It's a true statement. But for a mithya problem, you require a mithya solution. Is ignorance absolutely real, or is ignorance mithya? So anyway, you get the point. So there's some truth in what he says, but that doesn't... The only thing I don't like is he says merely teaching aids. That word merely rubs me the wrong way because the teachings of Advaita are unparalleled in their skillful methodology to lead you step by step to understand that which can't be understood in any other way whatsoever. So we could call it a teaching device, teaching aids, he says, but I wouldn't say merely. Just to finish his question here, must we then, if that's so, then must we not merely ignore everything else in Advaita and just meditate to gain our own realization? And this is really off in the wrong direction. So this method, as I said, there is a mithya problem for which we require a mithya solution. Ignorance doesn't go away on its own, so we require this profound methodology. And to say, oh, but it's not absolute truth. So I keep saying Vedanta is not a collection of statements of truth. Throw it away then. Vedanta is mithya. It's not absolute reality. It's not absolute truth. Throw it away. You know, what do they say? Baby with bathwater. That methodology is crucial. And if all you do is meditate, as the questioner suggested, you've denied yourself access to that methodology. So that's not enough. Shall we take 5 more minutes? Question? Any remaining questions here in our hall? Okay, then let's take maybe 1 or 2 more here, and then we'll wrap up. Okay. This is a question from Danilo, who is from Italy. Nice. The question says, to see an object, his question is, to see an object, light rays are transmitted, reflected to our retinas, vibrations, what I've said before, optic nerve to our brain, sensation reaches the brain, sensations are converted by mind into ideas. We call them vrittis, mental objects, all correct. But so, all I know of the object is the idea of the object, which is the mental representation of the object. Absolutely correct. But then, I can't discover, I think, I can't understand the relationship between the physical object outside and the mental object inside. The existence of an outside object is it only inference or assumption? How to prove that anything exists outside our own minds? This is a reference to a famous philosophical tradition called idealism. And they make an interesting argument, and that is, partially it's in alignment with Vedanta, partially it's not. The part that's in alignment with Vedanta is this. Think about this statement. The only thing you can directly experience is the contents of your mind. Okay? This is a Vedantic statement. It's also fully embraced by idealism. The only thing you can directly experience is the contents of your mind. You cannot directly experience the world outside. You only indirectly experience the world outside. But this now leads to a philosophical problem. How can we be sure that we're not hallucinating the world outside? And that's not an unfair representation of idealism. Idealism denies the absolute reality of anything outside. Idealism is a philosophy which says the only thing that really exists is what you experience. The forms, the ideas, the vrittis in your mind. So this is strict idealism. There is a school of Buddhism which is very idealistic in the same way. There are some small, how to put this? There are some interpretations of Advaita Vedanta which are not mainstream, some non-mainstream interpretations of Advaita Vedanta which are highly idealistic, which means they deny the existence of anything outside. If you want to look it up, look up the word Ekajivavada on internet, and you'll find this. Anyway, but that's not mainstream. And the reason it's not mainstream is it's counterintuitive. If we have objects in our mind, and if those mental objects are collaborated by many people, for example, so you see a Swami sitting in a chair. An idealist would say, there's no Swami in the chair, there's only the Swami sitting in your mind. This is pure idealism. And the pure idealist would say, there's no Swami sitting in that chair at all. In fact, there's no chair. So this is idealism. Here, oh, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I think we need to wrap this up in just a minute. Collaboration. Here, the problem with the idealist is that you say there's a Swami on the chair. You say there's a Swami on the chair. You, everyone here will say there's a Swami on the chair. Now, if this was your personal hallucination, it's kind of what an amazing coincidence that you are all having the same hallucination at the same time. This is our argument against this kind of idealism. Now, by the way, the idealists have an answer for that. And they say, but everyone sees the Swami differently. So, I hope you'd agree that's a fairly weak argument. The fact that you all say there's a Swami sitting in this chair definitely suggests that it's not a mass hallucination, that there is some kind of of reality out here. There is a lot of philosophy that loves to argue about this. Arguments with these idealists and realists have gone on for hundreds of years and continue even today. But let's just conclude with this observation, and that is to ask, does an outside world really exist or not? Does that question address the problem of human suffering? Right? Suffering can come from outside, can just as easily come from inside. Whether or not there's a world outside or not doesn't really affect the issue that Vedanta addresses, which is this problem of suffering. Which means that question, is there really a world out there or not, is a purely philosophical question. I'm not saying it's not a good, it's a good question. It's an important question, but it's a question that falls into the category of philosophy, and really speaking, not Vedanta, since it doesn't address the problem of suffering. Whether or not the world out there exists or not, you can, you're free to believe what you want. Although, to be honest, to imagine we're all living this mass hallucination, anyway, let me not go on about that. So, Vedanta is not a collection of philosophical teachings. Vedanta is a methodology to remove your ignorance about your true nature and thereby put an end to suffering. This is a good place to conclude our satsang. Thank you all here in the hall for coming. Thank you all to the online students for watching this satsang. I'll mention once again, if you have a question, you can email it to me, SwamiT @arshabodha.org, and we'll try to take it up in the next session. We'll conclude with our prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. See you next time.